It's warming up a little bit outside. The snow is mostly melted. The snow and ice are melting off the roof of the big building here, but it's still chilly. Current temperature is 39.
Hi, Chad here with Purple Collar Life. In today's video, we're talking about pellet stoves and this buck stove, wood stove. And I'm a great person to talk to you about this because I have both. I've had this Harman P68 pellet stove for 10 years now. I've had this buck stove wood burner here in my basement of the house for 20 years now. So let's talk a little bit about the advantages and disadvantages, or if you're making a list, pros and cons of a pellet stove and a wood stove. Now I assume if you're here on YouTube looking for videos about pellet stoves versus wood stoves, you're doing research. So I've compiled here a list of pros and cons, things that I think that I would want to know if I were researching a pellet stove versus a wood stove. Like I said in the beginning, I have both. I've owned both for more than 10 years, so I think I have a pretty good understanding of the benefits and the drawbacks of each style of heating a home. Now before we put this big 20 by 40 addition on our house, with a cathedral ceiling with a 16-foot peak, our wood stove in the basement, the Buck Stove Model 91, would heat pretty much the entire house. It did a great job of spreading that heat throughout our original house. But when we put this part of the addition on with the tall ceiling and this big open space, we needed something else for this space, and for that we chose the pellet stove. Now let's just give a brief background here why we use wood to heat at all. The primary reason is our house is all electric. We do not have natural gas here on our property. So when I built the house over 20 years ago, I wanted to have a heat source. I chose electric baseboard heat since we didn't have gas. The problem with that is we live out here in the middle of rural Pennsylvania. The power does go out from time to time. So I needed an alternate heating source for when the power went out. I chose this wood stove. And it's been great. It's supplemented the heat really well. In fact, like I said, we actually use it to heat the main section of our house most of the time to try to keep those electric bills a little bit lower. Second reason we chose a wood stove to heat the house was because we live in the middle of the woods and we have an abundance of firewood around us that we enjoy cutting and splitting. So those are the two primary reasons that we use wood stove to heat the house. So I've broken these comparisons up into a couple categories: heat, starting, does it burn all day, power outage, noise, convenience, safety, costs, that's your initial investment, the fuel cost, consumption, the maintenance, and any repairs. So let's start here with the Buck stove, and we'll go category by category. So the first category is heat. With the Buck Model 91, the heat doesn't come out right away. You've got to build a fire in there first. So there's a delayed amount of time for the heat to start coming out from when you start the fire. It's nice and warm wood heat when it gets going. I think there's no better heat than wood heat from a fire or a pellet stove. It does have some temperature regulation, but not a whole lot. I can adjust. There's a fan setting down here. There is a rheostat inside here, and the fan will go more bold or less bold depending on how much heat I want to come out. Most of the time I crank it all the way up, let as much heat come out as possible here in the basement. That's what allows the heat to get the entire floor warm so the upstairs is warm. Once on, the heat stays on until the fire goes out. So I can turn the fan down, but this is still going to be making heat. There are some times when it's not that cold out, but there's a little bit of a chill. We might make a fire down here and crack a window because it gets too hot over time. It is constantly on, constantly going until the fire goes out, so like I said, it can get too hot. Talking about the heat from the Harman P68, A pellet stove heat is pretty instant. You turn the knob and it ignites pretty quickly within, I'm going to say, 2 minutes. And almost as soon as it's ignited, you can feel the warmth here, and it doesn't take very long, probably less than 3 minutes before the blower's on, blowing that heat out at you. Just like a wood stove, it is a nice warm wood heat, which I've said is my favorite type of heat. It's very easy to regulate the temperature. You've got a temperature control over on the side of most pellet stoves. You can either set the room temperature or the stove temperature, and it can kick on and off as needed. The disadvantage is we've found it can be hot and then chilly. So yes, it does heat up. It actually heats over your set point, and then once it gets to that point, it stops feeding the pellets. It'll let it cool down below the set point and then kick back on again. So you do have those waves of heat where you can be warm and then a little chilly and then warm and a little chilly, but it is self-managing the temperature. Now the starting process with this P91 is a process. It takes a while. You've got to get the paper crumpled up. I like to split my kindling. I make, a log cabin style. I let that catch on. I know some people put the paper up on top. I have still found that that's more difficult for me to get the fire going. I like the paper down below, make my log cabin. I do put some strips of paper on top that helps heat the flue a little bit faster. It gets the draft pulling up through. So there is a process. I actually set an Alexa timer. I check on it every 5 minutes. I close the air inlets. I close the damper over time. But the entire process probably takes half an hour of attention every 5 to 10 minutes. Now let's talk about starting this. Very easy. You want to make sure you've got pellets inside the hopper. You've cleaned out the inside using the scraper. And I did a video on that. I'll put a link up above. Once you've done those things, you can turn it on, set your temperature, and it does the work. Pretty easy to start the pellet stove. Will it burn all day? Sure. I can load this up at 6 o'clock in the morning before I go to work, and when I would get home from a close work distance day at like 5 o'clock, it'll still have some coals. If I'm working a longer distance day and I'm not home until 6:30 or 7, there's probably not many coals left in there. So yeah, you can load it up and it will burn throughout the day, but it is going to get lower and lower burn quality throughout the day as your fuel source depletes. Can you burn all day long in a pellet stove? Absolutely. The hopper here on the P68 is big enough to fit more than one bag of pellets. So usually I fill one bag, I let it burn throughout the day, and there's still pellets in it when I get home. So now you can hear the fans running. I'm actually going to close the damper up a little bit and let that heat come out into the room. So next question was power outage. This is great in a power outage. Yes, you'll lose the fan. I actually do have this outlet routed into my generator. So when the generator kicks on, I do have the fan still. But you could use a portable battery device like a Jackery to power that fan. But even without power, your fire is still going to burn in there. You can keep loading in wood, and this stove will put off heat. There's also those fans that are not electric that you can put up on top, and it uses the heat of the stove to make the fan spin, and it'll push that air out. So a wood stove is a great option for when there is no power because you will still have heat. This is where we're a little bit failing in the pellet stove side. I do have this outlet wired into my generator. So if the power goes out, I can start the generator up and still give us pellet stove power to heat this space. But if you didn't have a generator, you could probably use something like a Jackery, like a portable power station, but you'd need to have enough capacity to run the auger, the fan, and then the blower. So there's three things that are constantly running in the pellet stove. The other bad side of a power outage is if you're in the middle of burning like this and the power goes out right now, that fire is going to suffocate and it creates a lot of smoke. Without the exhaust pulling it out and without the auger going, that smoke just kind of billows in there, and it actually can make that smoke smell throughout your house. So if the power does go out, it's a little bit of a difficult situation with the pellet stove because A, you've got no more heat, and B, you're going to have that smoke smell as the fire inside there suffocates itself. Now let's talk a little bit about noise. Like I said, the fan's going right now. It's not overly loud. It wouldn't be disruptive. I'm easily talking over it. So it's not horrible, but there is the noise of the fan running in the background. I would say that this is less noisy than the pellet stove because all you're hearing is the fan. The pellet stove has a fan too, but it's also got the auger and another blower inside it. One of the nice noises about the wood stove is you will hear our Pennsylvania hardwoods crackle inside there. So if you've got oak, cherry, hickory, or maple in there, you do hear that wood burning, and as we know, that's a pleasing sound. This was the most surprising thing to us about a pellet stove. We had been used to a wood burner. Pellet stove's a bit more noisy. It's actually surprisingly noisy if it's in a living space like this. So to the right of me is our television and our seating area for the living room. And we find that in the wintertime, our television has to be a lot louder to enjoy it because of the pellet stove. We can't hear what people are saying at, let's say, volume level 10, 11, or 12 when the pellet stove's running. Sometimes it's 25, 26, or even 30 to hear what's on the television because of the pellet stove noise. Now, we did put it in the center of the room, so maybe it would have been better in a corner, but we found it's surprisingly noisy. You hear the fans going, you hear the auger feeding the pellets all the time, you actually hear the pellets falling into the burn pan. It's like a clicking noise. So there's a lot of noises that are just background noise if you're trying to do something else. Now, it's not overly loud, and you can adjust the fan speed of the blower so it's a little bit quieter, but more noisy than you would think. Let's talk about convenience a little bit. For the P91, you need somewhere to store the wood. So I've got wood in IBC totes outside. We've done videos on those in the past. I've got a stack of wood in the basement that's the wood that I can just grab in the middle of the night to load this back up. Firewood can be a little bit dirty. It can be buggy. The bark falls off sometimes. It's still got dirt inside it sometimes, and you need to be able to carry that firewood. So, you know, even if it's just one piece at a time, might be a couple pounds to carry it wherever you're carrying it from and put it in the stove. It's very convenient. It's easy and clean. Your fuel is in bags. So for us, we buy the Agway pellets. We store them in the basement, and you carry a bag up, put it in the hopper, throw the bag away, recycle it. It's plastic. Very easy, very clean, very convenient. Downside is you have to have somewhere to store those bags. You can see we burn through 2.5 to 3 tons a winter. We try to buy them all at the same time. So I've got a big area in the basement that's stacks of pellets. They've got to be stored somewhere dry where they're not going to get wet or draw moisture in. The other side of that is you need storage space, and you have to be able to lift and carry 40 pounds. So a bag at a time, carrying them for me up through the basement over here, lifting them up, ripping the top, dumping them in the hopper. So for someone who can't lift 40 pounds, you'd probably have to do cupfuls at a time, and that might be a little bit of a pain. Now let's talk about safety. Now, any source of flame adds a little bit of unsafe environment. There is an open flame with both the pellet stove and the wood stove. I have heard of fires in homes or garages from both a pellet stove and a wood stove. Typically those fires aren't from the actual stove, but from the chimney or the exhaust of the pellet stove. That's typically where the potential for a fire is. You do have hot surfaces. You wouldn't want to touch the glass or the metal surface on either the pellet stove or the wood stove. And with the wood stove, when you're starting it and you've got it opened up, there are sparks that can come out. A lot of the same safety issues. You are going to have hot surfaces here. When Mackenzie was young, she actually burnt her hand on a pellet stove, had to go to the hospital and have some creams and salves put on to heal that burn. So we ended up buying a protective gate for around here. But you do have hot surfaces that you wouldn't want to touch. Pellet stove is going to have way less sparks. You don't really even open this once you're burning. So there's not that risk of a spark flying out and catching something outside the fireplace on fire as much as with a wood stove. Now, what you've been waiting for, the cost. So we'll start with the initial investment. The initial investment on a buck stove today, model 91, is $3,882. I'm filming this in November of 2021. I paid considerably less than that 20 years ago when I bought this one. As far as the fuel cost, if you live in the woods like me and you've got the ability to cut and gather your own firewood, that fuel is free. If you have to buy wood here in Northwest Pennsylvania, it's about $180 to $200 a cord of really good stuff. I've got a local guy that has some wood that's been seasoned for 5 years. I actually bought some of that last year. I didn't video it. It was much better than the other wood that I bought last year because I ran out of firewood. So somewhere around $200 a cord. And if you're wondering how much wood's in a cord, there's about 700 pieces of split firewood in a cord. So if you do the math, it's about 27 cents per piece of firewood. So as far as consumption goes, when I'm burning the wood burner, I burn 8 to 16 pieces of wood in a day. That's all it takes to heat up this basement, heat the first floor, and keep us warm. On really cold days, obviously, you may double that. You may triple that on times when we're home all day long and I'm keeping it burning, making a lot of heat on a cold day. So I figure the cost, if I had to buy firewood, now remember, most of my firewood is free, but if I had to buy it, I'm spending $2.17 to $5 per day if you're burning 8 to 16 pieces of wood at 27 cents a piece. If you're burning wood that you have from your own land, free. Cost of the pellet stove. Your upfront investment's a little bit more than a wood stove. This particular Harman P68, if you were to buy it today, $4,719 is the price I found online. Again, we paid less than that 10 years ago, but as you would expect, things are more expensive now. As far as fuel costs, right now, Northwest Pennsylvania, it's $234 a ton, which equals $4.69 a bag, or $4.99 a bag if you just buy it by the bag. We buy it by the ton. We actually buy it from Agway. They deliver it, they carry it in, they stack it. It's amazing, and we found the Agway premium hardwood pellets burn best in our pellet stove. Less debris, less cleanup, more heat. Highly recommend the Agway premium pellets. Not sponsored, but it's a great product. So as far as consumption goes, we burn 1 to 2 bags a day. Like I said, it's about $5 a bag. So $5 to $10 a day is what we're spending with the Harman P68 to heat this 20 by 40 space. With a 16-foot cathedral ceiling, a lot of our heat is up there at the ceiling, not down here where we can enjoy it. Now let's talk about maintenance. Maintenance daily on this is simple. I take my little ash shovel, scoop the ash out of here, put it in a bucket, I'm ready to go. I do leave a little bit of ash in the bottom. I think that helps the fire burn a little bit better than a totally clean stove. And then once in a while, shot back the whole way around it, clean the glass, shot back the inside of the stove when it's cool, and of course your chimney maintenance, having the chimney sweep or someone clean and check out your chimney probably once a year, once every 2 years. Now let's talk about maintenance. I'll show some pictures. This actually just got fixed today. We've been without it for about a week. It needed a new thermostat. It had an issue with the auger. I had to hire a repair person to come out. He did a great job, showed me exactly what was wrong, replaced parts, and we're back up and running now. But as far as maintenance, simple daily maintenance, just to scrape out and clean this out. The other maintenance is kind of a pain. After every ton, you've got to really shop back and clean out the entire thing. You've got to pull out the ash container, carry it outside, dump it in the woods. It gets messy on the outside. It's not as easy as just cleaning the wood stove where I'm shoveling that ash out into a bucket, carrying the bucket outside. This is much more complicated than that. You've got to open up things, take things apart, shot back all up in all the vents and grooves. So a lot more maintenance after burning a ton of pellets than your daily maintenance. The other thing is that creosote gets burnt on down in the burn pan up against the igniter, so you're scraping hard at that pretty often. That can be a little bit difficult. But still, not horrible maintenance, but that annual or after every ton maintenance, I do not look forward to it. Let's put it that way. Repairs, I've had to do a couple things on this. I had to replace the rheostat, super easy, plug and play, put the new one in, take the old one out, connect it, no problem. Also had to replace the blower after probably 10 years. No problem there either, just simply unbolt, disconnect it from the electronic, reconnect the new one, bolt it up. So 2 very simple repairs. At the time, those parts were not expensive at all. The initial investment has served us really well here. Looking up those parts now, they are much more expensive than when I bought them. Now that could be pandemic pricing due to supply shortages, I'm not sure, but parts now are much more expensive than when I bought the other ones for this. So I just said this had been repaired. This has many more moving parts than a wood stove does. We've got the auger that's moving, we've got 2 blowers or fans in there, we've got sensors, we've got a circuit board, we've got an ignition system, so more stuff that can go wrong and more stuff that does go wrong over time. The repairs are a little bit more complicated. I didn't make the repair on this myself. I wasn't exactly sure what I was looking for or how to do it. So it cost me a little bit more than if I could fix it myself like I did with the wood stove downstairs. Parts are also really expensive now. Obviously circuit boards are crazy expensive, but even little thermostats, sensors, those parts are more expensive right now than I think they have been in the last several years, and it could just be the supply chain, the supply shortage. So there you have it. My thoughts on my experiences of a pellet stove versus a wood stove. And let me say in conclusion, I'm happy with both. There are pros and cons, advantages and disadvantages to each method of heat, but I prefer the pellet stove or the wood stove to electric baseboard heat and expensive electric bills. Thanks for watching. I hope this helped you out if you're doing research on a pellet stove versus a wood stove. If you enjoy videos like this, give us a thumbs up, comment down below, and if this video helped you in some way, we'd hope you'd consider subscribing. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again the next time.